Det var jätteroligt. I år har jag haft en annan rolig uppgift som projektledare för det här fantastiska eventet. Jag vill presentera MTD-gruppen. Jag tänker gå igenom dem alla en och en och deras ansvarsområden, och så vill jag ha en lika fin applåd som vi gjorde precis just nyss för varenda en av dem, för så jäkla bra är de så att det förtjänar dem. Vi börjar som sig bör. Robin Lundell, sponsoransvarig. Tobias Johansson Ramnes, tryck- och PR-ansvarig. Frida Mattisson, projektassistent. Kristoffer Dahl, bankettansvarig. Gustav Lindberg, exjobb och alumniansvarig. Carl-Johan Krantz, teknikansvarig. Thomas Forsyth Rosin, PR-webbansvarig. Philip Burridge, föreläsaransvarig. Anna Flisberg, kassör. Simon Kalin Clark, mässansvarig. Och Gabriella Ivarsson, koordinator. Och sen skulle jag vilja få fram konferenciärerna här. Ja, så. Tack så hemskt mycket för ett otroligt bra jobb ni har gjort. Det har varit jättekul att ha er som konferenciärer. Hanna Johansson och Andreas Walter, en stor applåd. Jag kommer lämna över till dem så får de presentera våran sista föreläsare för Medieteknikdagarna 2012. Tack för att ni kom hit.
Vänta lite, jag tror Kristina glömde någon väldigt, väldigt viktig person. Kristina Wolter, projektledare MTD2012. Så, tack. Okay, I'm going to do this in English, so we'll see how it goes. MTD 2012 is soon coming to its end, and these 2 days have been really awesome. I'm glad to have been a part of it, and will now present to you the final lecturer. His name is Rasmus Andersson, and started his first job as a designer in 1998. Since then, he has worked as a creative and art director and photographer in a number of different companies such as Spray, Lear Corporation, Notion, and Spotify. Today, Rasmus works as a senior product designer at Facebook, and in this lecture, he will tell us about his journey, what he has learned so far, and why putting yourself into a niche category is not important. Welcome, Rasmus.
Hello everyone, I choose to do this in English because it's the best language. No, but seriously, I am gonna do this in English because I could do this in Swedish or I could do this in English. It's basically just flipping a coin. It's kind of what Matthias was saying earlier, if you were listening to him. It's kind of like staying between the French of Swedish or English. Anyhow, my name is Rasmus, and today I'm gonna talk about something that is has little to do with the actual stuff I've been doing, but rather a role that we see emerging in like our community and in like the tech community in general, I believe. Generally called designer/programmer. Just before we start with this, I'm just gonna like shout out like who am I? Now I didn't know that I got this amazing presentation before. So I've done like a numerous set of small little projects, big and large, companies or just weekend hacks. I think it's so much fun to build stuff, to like have an idea, get an idea. Maybe I wake up like super early in the morning and I have this crazy idea I was dreaming about, and then I make a little bit more sense of it, and then I'm like, yeah, let's spend this Sunday doing this thing. Even though it might sound kind of crazy, let's just like build it. It's a Sunday after all, right? And then I've done like bigger things like Spotify. I offered 4 years full time of my life for Spotify. Even though I was the designer of everything, kind of the product department in a way, I spent some time writing code too. Like this is my code contribution to the desktop client in Spotify. So I've always had this like multi-role in everything I'm doing. And before continuing, I would just like to rephrase this: a designer/engineer is probably a better word to put on this. Like a programmer is. Now I'm speaking when you're reading this, I'm sorry about that, but programmer is more about like someone who programs computers, which is kind of like a little bit off. Read this. Anyhow, these are definitions from the Oxford Dictionary, and they're about the designer that is doing one of these things. There's an or, and then we have this engineer who is doing one of these things. Sometimes we know they might be doing one or more of these things at the same time. And kind of this role that we're seeing today becoming more and more common, both in big companies. As I work for Facebook, we have a lot of people who are these kind of like multi-talented people. You kind of become somewhat of like a small team. And this does not mean that you're a one-man army. It kind of works out pretty well for small projects, or if you're spending your Sunday, or if you're having like a kind of like a month hack for yourself on your weekends or evenings and stuff like that. In larger projects, though, like complex products, if you will, you cannot do everything yourself. If you do everything yourself, it's going to be crappy, right? You're actually going to be good at one thing. You're going to be pretty decent at a few things, and you're going to be terrible at most things. That's just how it works. And so for your own little hacks, and I'm going to come back to this later, why it's interesting to kind of like embody this thing, or at least try to evaluate if it's something for you. So in a complex product, you have to work together, right? So you find these, you kind of compartmentalize the project, like divide it up into these components, if you will, like logical parts of a product, right? And then you find your little thing. So you kind of own everything from the idea or the vision to the design to the function or user experience, if you will, down to the implementation and the actual shipping, maintenance, and in some cases marketing of this particular part of the product. Often in constellations like this that's on the screen here, you'll find someone who has the vision, who is the one single person who doesn't have a line here, but kind of like looks at the whole product from a user's perspective, kind of to find kind of discrepancies in communications and experiences across these different modules or components of the product. It's generally just this thing. And then everyone hugs together. So one really important thing about this is that we need to learn how to learn. If you just learn a set of tools, like look at this funky slide here. If you just learn a set of tools, those tools are going to be old, antiquated at the time you master them, right? It doesn't really matter what it is. If it's like a wrench, today, like if you're a professional mechanic, sure, you might use a wrench sometimes, just like get that old classic feeling of a wrench. Mostly you just use like a pneumatic, like super wrench of some kind. Like mice kind of disappearing. It was a really good proxy for the human hand to do something. These hands are amazing, by the way. And like a folder, but God, they're still around. They're still around. Kids growing up today, they see a folder in a computer, they have no clue what it actually means, right? It's an old symbol. Pencils kind of disappearing, at least from the major spectrum of things. Writing stuff on paper and scrawling it, kind of getting smaller too. Like a hammer is still pretty useful though. So all these tools are, they are kind of like important for you. You need them. You can never get away from tools. They are, after all, what we created as a humankind to kind of progress us, right? But what really matters is the ideas. It's the ideas that makes the tools usable, right? If you just have a tool and you have no idea what to use it for, you're kind of like, oh, that looks like a hammer. Someone told me that's the name of it. You have no idea how to use it, right? You don't even have like I don't need to do anything with a hammer up here, right? So kind of you get an idea and you invest in ideas rather than investing in tools. At the same time, you're gonna need through life and through like whatever to build your set of tools, right? Kind of like your toolkit or toolbox, and that's gonna change like every week, every month, depending on your industry. It's gonna be different paces. But even if you're in the slowest industry ever, a year is going to change your toolbox. If you're in the fastest industry, a month is going to change your toolbox. So don't rely on the tools to actually realize your ideas and getting shit done, but rely on ideas and invest in how to come up with ideas. Invest in creativity, what makes you creative. Like one little takeaway is that patterns in life usually is a kind of correlates with creativity or actually your creative power. So if you do the same thing every morning, same thing every day, you're gonna be less creative, or it's gonna be harder for you to be a creative person. So if you break these tiny little patterns away, like if you usually go to the bathroom and then have breakfast, do it the other way around next morning. Like change these little things. Take a different path to work. These little things. That's kind of the stuff you wanna spend time on, kind of building this idea thing in your mind. And it's kind of what I was speaking about. It correlates, interestingly, if you rely on specific tools versus if you rely on ideas. When it comes to efficiency, ability, or time, you can kind of invert this line here. We just switch places of ideas and specific tools, and you'll have time. Ability is kind of the same thing as time, because you're never going to have time to build awesome stuff. In the sense of like, oh, this is so pretty, like, I'm going to polish this, and like, this red little pixel here is like not the exact red. Forget it. You never, in real life, like, you never will have time to do that stuff. Or like, oh, the name of this class or this method is like, looking up in the dictionary, it's not perfect, and you know, at the time of the day when you find the perfect name, like your colleague or like whoever is relying on this stuff you're writing, they're gonna move ahead with something else, right? So time is super important, and finding ways to do stuff in reasonable time, I would say, is kind of the ability to be able to build something. So you take these things, you take the ideas you have, and you take this toolkit, and you create this little product, right? That's kind of like embodying the whole idea of what we at Facebook call hack. Like you take an idea, you take your tools that you have with you all your time, and you just build it. You just see what happens, and you do it quickly. You need to be able to do this. You need to be able to move really fast on these things, and then you kind of evaluate what it actually means, and if it's a good idea. Most cases, your idea is going to be worthless in your own minds. And most other people are actually not going to think they're worthless. So even though you have like the craziest ideas, ask your friends, hey, I have this idea and it's a little bit weird, but hear me out. And it might actually be a good idea. A lot of successful products started as crazy ideas. So building your own ideas, why? It's a big question mark. Like, why should I even build my own ideas? Like, other people have ideas. I just want to type code, put pixels on the screen. That's what people usually think that I do, or like draw stuff in a paper, because it's fun. Woo! Fun. Yes! Fun. Woo! Yeah, look at this. We're having fun, right? But more importantly, when you're building your own stuff, the stuff that comes out is coherent. And for this Swedish part of the audience, coherent kind of means being, like appearing as a unit, kind of like a little family, kind of a thing that fits together in its own local little world. Being consistent in a way. And this is a really important part. There's so many products out there that is going to be, from the user's perspective, again, extremely incoherent. It's got to be like, oh my God, like when I'm in this view of this crazy app that is doing everything, not using standard components, like when I click the button here, this happens. But when I'm in this view, clicking this button, then this happens. Then in most cases, there got to be two different people or even two different teams of people that work on, like, you work on view A, we work on view B, see you at lunch. And they just ship this stuff, and someone just makes sure that it works according to some specification. And it's going to be a shitty user experience. So when you have these, if you just quickly jump back to the slide over here, we can have a look at this guy. Well, this is a nice slide. These little details here, like this little circle or disk, this triangle and this square here, could be those little points in your application. They shouldn't be like view A and view B. They should be these abstract definitions of functionality, rather than like a look and feel kind of thing that you can look at. Because if you go all that way, see, can I skip quickly? I think I can. Come on. It's fun and so on. Anyhow, I lost my track. Sorry. I'm just gonna forget about it and move on. We'll have time for questions later. Anyhow, this is usually how the process looks like when you're creating a product. First, you come up with this idea. Let's call it ideation, the actual kind of task or whatever you want to call it, of sitting down and speaking about your ideas. And believe it or not, this is actually a pretty big part of my job and a lot of my colleagues' jobs in many different companies. There are even companies that only do this first thing, ideation. It's super important, and you're gonna want to iterate on your idea 100 times. And you should never be afraid of killing your darlings, to discard your own idea for being wrong. And that kind of comes back to what I said recently, that an idea that you have, that you might deem out or as a crazy idea or a bad idea in your own mind, you should just let it out there, put it out there, and see what people have to say about it. Sometimes it's the best ideas, or you combine it together with someone else's idea. And then you go over to prototyping, and this is also important. And so many companies and products are built without prototyping. You get this idea, oh, it's an awesome idea. You pass the whole ideation thing. This might be explicit, or it might be implicit. It might be that you actually sit down and you say, now we're going to think about our idea. Or somebody just comes up with an idea that everyone likes, and you just build it, and no one even thought about it. And then you just jump straight to execution. You're just like, let's hack, Let's put some fire in this keyboard. And then you come up with oh, let's ship this thing, please. And people are like, but wait a second, this is a pretty shitty solution of this thing. And then you're gonna find out that oh my God, yeah, this feels bad. You have this thing coming out from the side, and it's 2 frames per second, and you're like, yeah, people probably care about that. I don't think so, but they did. And now our whole animation framework that we spent 500 man-hours building is worthless. We gotta throw it away, going back to the start. So what you want to do is, after you found your idea, or during even the ideation process, you see this little nice arrow going back there, kind of recursion, or whatever you want to call it, you prototype stuff. And prototyping can be super simple and quick. It doesn't mean that you need to build a perfect product. Rip this up on paper. Like we often do this, that we take a piece of paper and we take scissors and we take some like markers with different colors and we cut this paper into pieces and we model this idea as we realize it, kind of how we realize the interface. And we put it on a table, kind of like a table here. And we stand around the table and then we kind of move these things around. And then someone says like, but what happens if the network goes down? Like this little thing we're doing is network able of some sort. Like, oh yeah, like, okay, so this happens or this thing happens. That is one kind of prototyping. It fits a little closer to ideation than actual execution. Another kind of prototyping that is very popular today, I'm gonna go in a little bit on that later, is to do this in WebKit. Like WebKit is an amazing thing. I can speak a little bit more about that in the questions part, which is gonna be in about 20 minutes or so, maybe 30 minutes. Anyhow, you can do this in pretty high fidelity with WebKit with just a few hours of work, maybe even less than that. So when it comes to large projects, you want to spend time here. This is where you can be super impactful as a designer/engineer. You have the ability. So a designer, to reiterate, a designer is often a person that kind of plans ahead. What is ahead of the road, right? How is this going to be perceived in the end? Can I have this vision in a way? An engineer usually does like the actual implementation of things. They're both equally creative jobs. Don't misinterpret me here. But when you combine these two, you get something very powerful, right? Because you can own this whole cycle. This whole cycle, you can own this whole part. Especially this highlighted part in this slide right here. In smaller projects, like this is gonna be you. The whole thing is gonna be you. Compartmentalization, execution, ship it, can all be on the same Sunday, right? Marketing, Twitter or whatever, right? Maybe Facebook. I should probably say Facebook. And then you want to do maintenance. Yeah, that's the boring part, but whatever. We have to deal with it. So to kind of sum this up, what I've been taught in life, like my parents, they were kind of like, okay, like if you want to do this thing, like if you want to have, like I had this long hair, I looked like a girl, and they were like, okay, but we might not like it, but we're gonna let you do it. And then I was a little bit older, and I was like, I want to go to this like, I'm gonna take this one word in Swedish, mediegymnasiet, which is kind of college for media students. At the time, it was like perceived as where all the kids went that didn't want to go to school and they just want to like smoke cigarettes and hang out. So my parents were devastated, but they were like, okay, you want to do this stuff, like do it, but we might have to do something about it later. They said to themselves, told me this later. Anyhow, they just told me to like follow my heart. And all the people I met that have followed their hearts and done so in a common sense way, like if you really like to play a computer game, like they're like people who actually do that for money, right? So you can actually do that. Like that's common sense, yeah. If you want to build spaceships, like you can do it. It's not like there's a certain kind of people that are born to build spaceships. Like you can build spaceships. You can do whatever you want, right? So you kind of find what you like in life. And what I liked was like at the time when I was a kid, I liked to draw stuff. Like I found out about things in books and I kind of like wrote the same thing on paper. And I felt that I've done some like, scientific stuff. Of course I didn't. And then I drew this like a potato. There was a spaceship that could fly. I was very proud about that one. And then I came into photography. And then I started this little magazine in my high school and so forth. So I never really knew what I was doing like a year from now, but I knew what I loved to do today. And I did it. And eventually I was just like super good at it. And someone said like, hey, I was in 8th grade. And someone said, hey, do you want to work for us? Like, actually work? Yeah. You mean for money? Yeah, sure. I was like 8th grade. This American car company was like, give me money. Not doing the most exciting stuff, but at least like someone wanted to pay me for the stuff that I really like to do. And that was kind of the threshold when I understood that, like, I can actually do this stuff. So whatever you do, like, find the stuff that you like to do, however obscure or weird it is, and just, like, go for it. It rarely fails. I still haven't met anyone who just, like, gave everything they had for a long time and failed. So, kind of calming down a little bit, when you're approaching a challenge of some sort, it could be you have this product that you thought out, this idea that we talked about before. You're going to have a challenge in finding the semantics in a problem. So often people look at the surface of something and they try to, like, find a solution for what they perceive, and they don't look. Oh my God, I'm losing the words. Sorry. They don't look deep enough to find the actual semantics behind the challenge or the problem. So we can look at this little exercise here. A simple analogy. This is a problem. Like, you over here, you're team A, you're team B. You have a problem here you need to solve, right? This crazy client, this island 2000 asks you to build this thing. You got to build a vehicle that can efficiently transport a number of people from point A to point B. And this is the map of the island, right? And so Team A here comes up with this awesome, super funky 60s looking bus. But I tell you, this bus, it's the latest bus. And it's so quick. It can take the turns like a crazy bus, like a snake. And it can load a lot of people, yeah. But Team B, they just built this cableway, right? Team B, they just looked at this problem. We need to take a shot from point A to point B. And they saw the semantics in the problem, not the surface, not this now gray road here going around, right? Someone said vehicle, you'll think car with wheels, and there's a road, and well, let's build a really good car, right? So look for the semantics in the problems you're trying to solve. This is not a little thing. I just put there a few words. It's kind of like, you're not like a specific thing. Like today, you might be a Python programmer. Tomorrow, like I'm pretty sure you're going to be a C++ programmer, and you're going to be a JavaScript programmer. Like the day after that, you're going to like switch roles, right? You're going to be like the designer, and I don't know, going to make coffee. So don't look at yourself as I'm this specific role, because if you do that, this thing that we spoke about earlier, finding your path and where your heart belongs is going to be so much harder. Then you're going to narrow down your perspective of the world until you hit this, like, which Ruby library is like the web server of this week, right? And then you're going to think that everything is awesome that is a Ruby library, and everything that's not a Ruby library is not really interesting, right? There's nothing wrong with Ruby. So here's another takeaway. Mentioned that I was going to talk a little bit about this. So if any of you are listening to this I'm saying, and if you're kind of interested about this whole thing of like building your own stuff, then building hybrid apps today, this is like today's technology. This might be completely antiquated in a year. I have no idea. We never know, right? It's kind of you build this hybrid apps. This is a very classic model. Classic already, even though it's new. Weird. You use WebKit for your presentation. So it's an amazingly optimized rendering engine, a layout engine. It can do some pretty crazy stuff, right? In the WebKit team, they have this rule that says when you apply a patch to the code base, if the tests that they run, performance tests, makes it slower, even by a millisecond, that patch is reverted, and you need to fix that. You can never make WebKit go slower. Sorry, higher number. You can never make WebKit go slower with a patch. If you patch it so it goes faster, the next person cannot make it go slower. It's very interesting. There's very few projects today that have this saying. So WebKit, over the years, have become this like amazingly optimized little cool thingy, right? You can choose to build your own rendering engine, your own like layout engine. You can use like the stuff that Apple will provide you with, although they're really good, or the stuff that's in Android that is also good, but this shit is the best today, right now. Maybe not tomorrow. JavaScript, everyone loves JavaScript, or maybe not, is great for UI logic. Due to how browsers works today, and I should say that with WebKit, I mean a web view, in everyday speak, JavaScript is going to run in the same thread, and I guess everyone knows what a thread is in a computer, right? No? Yes? Okay. This little thing where you're like kind of like, no, it's my turn, now it's my turn. It's like a little queue. It's like you're standing in the line to buy a hot dog, and only the person in the front line of the hot dog line can actually get a hot dog, right? The other one needs to wait for their time to get a hot dog. So when you place yourself in that hot dog line, you're like, okay, I can wait here for like 5 minutes before I get a hot dog. Otherwise, I need to rush. I'll get like a burger on some burger place, okay? So you have this like threshold yourself. When you're building an app, especially in modern environments, 10 milliseconds is usually the rule of thumb. If you spend more than 10 milliseconds, like, you have a problem. Because about 10 milliseconds, you're starting to make the possible lowest frame rate to go below 60 frames per second, which is kind of what the human eye can perceive. You all know this about the frame rate. So when you're doing shit in JavaScript that is running in the same thread, you want to keep it to a minimum, right? And so UI logic is usually the best stuff to put in there. And then the next little thing here, now put native code here. It could be whatever kind of code, of course. It could be JavaScript in a separate process, a separate thread, if you can do that. You should carry the actual logic of the client or the product or whatever shit you're building. So we'll do all the data shuffling or whatever stuff. Maybe you're doing some like image computations. You want to do that there. You do not want to do that in the same place as you draw the actual UI stuff, right? And then you want to use some kind of local storage. Maybe your hardware has a disk. You put it on disk. Maybe it doesn't. You put it in the memory of some sort. And then if it's network able, you want to have the actual state store, like the canonical state, the actual final state. If two states are to compete, like, that's the one that wins. You want to store it remotely, and you want this kind of like data storage thingy to synchronize between them. So if you just like think about, I want to build this idea, and where should I start? Like, there's a million ways to do this. This is one model that I give you. It's a really good model. I've used this myself numerous times. I know a lot of applications that use this. Yeah, slide. Take it twice. We go back here. Nice slide. So the question when we get back here is, where do you draw the line, right, between what is web and what is native? It totally depends on your implementation, your application, your product, right? If it's something very text-heavy or something that does not require a lot of work, you might choose to go all the way down and skip native at all, right? You just put a little web view in there and do everything. Basically, just frame a website, right? If you're doing something that's super critical, that's doing a lot of graphical work or a lot of other media work or whatever it might be, you want to put this line as high up as you can, right? Because WebKit can do rendering and layout super efficiently, like a JavaScript is going to be a little slower. And this kind of like translates over to prototype quickly or have like a stable kind of base. That's usually the effect. Although people can argue about this not being true, it doesn't matter. They might be right, they might be wrong. This is the effect that I've seen out in the real world and stuff that I built or been part of building. Usually spend 5 or 10 more units of time or value or people power on building something that's really stable in web technology when you go all the way down with that line on the left-hand side there. But you gotta prototype much more quicker, especially with user interfaces. Anyhow, I'm kind of closing to the end of my talk here. And now we're gonna do a few questions. I just want to ask you, like here in the audience, is there anything you want to change? Like the stuff in your life today, the apps you're using, like the websites you're using, the cars you're driving or not driving, the buses you're riding, like, is there anything you want to change? What do you want to change? They look bad? And do you have an example? I think this is going to be hard to kind of like get the audience ramped up by, but because I think it's kind of hard to convey what you said. I really not get it myself. I'm sorry. But if we have these like small things in life, right, that we all think about every day, and you all have like a ton of things. I heard a few people screaming here. We all have these small things that want to change. And we can actually change them. It's not like there's like a separate department of the universe that changes these things. It's just us, right? So just build shit and like change them. Okay, thank you. Yeah, you can give me applause now if you like. Questions or whatever. It doesn't need to be a question. It could be like, you're wrong or ugly or whatever. Something.
Thank you. Can you change too much? Like, can you do too much change?
Oh, yes. If I can change too much. Not me, but the thing you're doing. Yeah. Of course you can. I mean, in the end, what really matters about products is the user experience, right? You fake it till you get there, or you make something really good till you get there. In the end, it doesn't matter how you get there, as long as it's a good experience, right? And numerous research and common sense will tell you that if you change the user experience too much, people are going to be, what the fuck, right? Things are moving around. There's a whole lot of things we can talk about here, right? There's cognitive ability among people. We have evolved to deal with the spatial world. Like grabbing this ball is very simple, even though it's actually a pretty complex thing. If you've done like robotics, you know that this is like if you can do this with a robot like this, you're pretty awesome, right? And we think this is super easy, right? So we will learn to deal with a spatial world. And if I know what this ball is, I can like close my eyes and I can pick it up. If this ball moves around, I need to, every time I pick it up, I need to look here, find the ball, pick it up. That is called like cognitive value, or spend a lot of cognitive value there, right? That is bad. And that makes my experience with this water bottle feel very, very like frictionful, right? So yeah, definitely change in user experience is terrible. Change below user experience. You want to kind of nourish an environment where you're developing stuff so that it can take a lot of change, right? Because you're always going to need to change things. New technologies rise every day, and your own ideas are going to change over time as you build a product. So you're going to need a way to almost kind of like detach the actual user experience from your implementation.
Okay, so say that you have to choose one thing.
Yep.
What are you most happy about changing, and what were you really excited about having the opportunity to change, which might not have turned out the way you expected?
So that's a great question. So I believe in a higher sense, I can answer two ways to this, I think. In a higher sense, I think being part of Spotify and changing the record industry felt really good because, it kind of needed a kick in the back. And that felt really good, and change something like that. That's like on the higher level, which I'm kind of talking about here, right? Like changing things on the abstract thing, not thinking that, I can only do this little, I can only change the code. No, you can like change everything. In the smaller sense, I think we're changing. Oh my God, this is too hard. I'm gonna get back to you on that one. Yeah, thank you.
Does anyone else have a question for Rasmus?
Okay, so you obviously spend time with a lot of different technologies and are not afraid to dive into them and learn about them.
No, should never be.
No, so I was kind of hoping for some advice on that. Like, how do you best attack a new project or a new technology? How do you do it?
So when I attack a new idea, I would say, or a project, sometimes it could be something that I'm helping out in. Like, I've been helping out a lot in something called Node.js. I spent about 1.5 years, like, kind of helping out there, both with how things should work and how things should look when it comes to the API and actual implementation, right? The nitty-gritties, right? And in a situation like that, this is a project that I haven't created. I've only jumped in and then jumped out. Someone else already has a vision, right? In this particular project, this guy called Ryan has this vision about the super neat little like networking framework, right? So that will be the preface almost to where I should start thinking, right? And then the technology in this case is already planned. It's C++ and it's JavaScript. And then like my toolbox now consists of JavaScript, C++, a good understanding of operating systems, because that's kind of the level it's acting on. A good understanding of what people want to find in an API like this, and a good understanding what people perceive this product being, right? Because what we expect and what we get defines our experience. If a friend of yours says, dude, you gotta see this movie, it's the best movie ever made, right? You go and see this movie and you gotta have expectations in the ceiling, right? And if the movie is good, you're gonna think it's bad because it wasn't awesome, right? But your friend says like, yeah, it's pretty good. You should probably go see it. Like it's a movie for the theaters. You go and see it, and it's equally good, but you'll experience it as a better movie, right? So that is interesting. In a project where I carry everything myself, I choose the technology completely based on what will get me there in the quickest possible time, with a minimal set of effort, which kind of is the same thing as time, with the highest quality, right? And I think about my end user goal, my vision, the user experience, everything in between needs to be fun because I build this myself. Like everything in life needs to be fun. Sometimes we're gonna do 50% boring stuff, but that's gonna be boring stuff to get us to the fun parts, right? And that's gonna make the boring stuff just being kind of a passage. So I'm gonna choose technology that I'm interested in at that moment. And all technology is kind of like interesting, right? So one day you want to try this thing, and the other day you want to try this thing, right? So that is what defines what I would do.
Okay, we develop products and we send these products out into the world, and the products, they have to work or else they die. And you say that we're supposed to jump on and use new technologies. There's these new tool sets, but how much time do we need to understand the tools before we actually use them in production? Or is it just play as much you want with the actual tools, and then eventually a use may come up? So my question is, when do we actually use new tools in production?
That's a great question. It's kind of specific as you added production, right? If we forget about the production word for a second, I believe it's crucial for us all to try new things in life, including new technologies. You should spend your time, like paid time and not paid time, whatever, if it's a job, to explore new things. Because if you don't explore new things, you don't know about them, right? You might have heard about them, but that is not the same thing as knowing about them. Knowing them is a different thing from knowing about them, right? Knowing something like Photoshop is a tool, right? Knowing C++, oh my God, that's a complex thing, right? It's got to take a lifetime to master one of those two tools. But if you know about it, or if you know it, you can go a long way, right? Because when you have this toolbox I was talking about before, this is something you build up over life, right? Sometimes like this wrench that goes like far in the bottom, you haven't used that for a while. Like you got to find this one day, like, oh God, I'm still carrying this old like active server pages maybe around here, and you like throw it away, right? Like I haven't used this for 10 years. And then you put like your crazy ass, I don't know, like IO Surface API thingy you just built in there, and you go, well, this is some hot stuff. I don't fully understand how it works, but it's pretty cool that I can pass this texture between two processes. And so you spend a little time, you have this project coming up where you need to do some rendering. If you guys were listening to Matthias Arlitz talk a little bit earlier, he was talking about this thing, they're in Spotify, they're separating kind of like these apps they have from the actual like user interface. They gotta need this specific technology that I'm taking as an example right now, right? And then you come to this project and you're like, yeah, like this is a perfect fit. And now you know about it, right? Because you have experimented with it. You haven't released any stuff yet because you actually don't know it, right? You know what it can do though. So you put that in there and you just start hacking. Because you're never gonna master anything until it's too late, right? Well,
okay, but is it a different person that goes on these exploratory Christopher Columbus rides into Node.js and new technologies, and then you say, hey, I found this super wrench tool, use this instead, to another team that actually implements it? So is it a different person that discovers then implements?
Yeah, I get it. Hopefully not. Why? I mean, come on. If you go out and you learn about this amazing kind of food or something like that, and then you tell your friend, like, this food is awesome, eat this. This is how it goes. Like, this is how it looks like. You'll tell everything about it. And this person doesn't like this kind of food, right? Still, he or she understands that it's good food. Like, it's well made, or it's like, it's nutritious, right? But she might not like it. And it's actually super interesting. Like, we're not machines or robots. Like, we're these creative human beings, right? And everyone needs to have fun and find purpose in the things we do every day. And also another argument for being the same person experimenting and the same person actually performing implementation and maintenance is that you will have a complete understanding of the whole cycle. You have learned about this technology from the bottoms up, from actually becoming interested in it, or maybe not interested, but kind of curious. Until you get to know this technology, kind of getting to know it, put it into a product that you shipped that people used, and there were kind of bugs in there because you didn't fully understand it. Fix those, build knowledge of it, come to kind of love it and hate it. If it's C++, you gotta have two strong feelings about it. So I think it's important that it's the same person.
Okay, thank you.
What do you think about the future, for example, WebGL?
WebGL is, for you who don't know about it, which is none here, I think, OpenGL ES in a web browser, basically. So OpenGL in the web browser is of course interesting. I mean, OpenGL today powers most things, right? Even if it's ActiveX, it's kind of like the same idea that OpenGL has, like this pipeline of things. You have a state machine, and you can in the end you can reach a really good performance rate. So why wouldn't you want to have that? That's great, right? What's lacking and what's kind of like the problem with WebGL, I would say. Now, I'm not a WebGL expert. I've done my share of WebGL though. The problem you have that it's not in the DOM, right? You get this little window in this WebKit thing, for instance, that we were talking about before. That's awesome. You get this little window, and inside there, like, the pixels are yours, right? There's no event handling. There's no like other funky stuff like screen reading capabilities for Braille keyboards, for instance. Like you're on your own. You need to implement a shitload of things that you expect to be there on your own. You're reinventing wheels. That's the bad part of WebGL. So I think if you're doing something with WebGL, you have the ability to actually combine things from the DOM to provide accessibility and to provide event handling and get that kind of for free, if you will, by combining the two technologies.
Okay. Here I am.
I see.
What would you say is the biggest design challenge for Facebook today?
It's good that you asked the Facebook question. I cannot talk about Facebook for...
Do it.
Okay, actually, let's talk about Facebook.